I congratulate members for their contributions in the debate so far, and in particular, of course, the Honourable Member for Gorton and Denton for a very impassioned first speech about the rich traditions in her constituency of standing in unity and for humanity against attempts to divide. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's now also 6 years since I delivered my first speech in Parliament during a similar debate on International Women's Day, in which I paid tribute to our local history of women's struggles for social justice, which continue to be daily sources of inspiration. Today's debate comes as the cost of living crisis continues to foster a sense of injustice, uncertainty and anxiety across the UK, set against a brutal backdrop of more than a decade of Conservative austerity and chronic underinvestment in public services, services which were left hollowed out and in many instances privatised by the last government. The cost of living crisis has meant that women are more likely than men to lose their jobs or reduce their paid work, given that they are more frequently employed in sectors that have been directly disrupted by austerity measures and impacted by cuts and underinvestment in public services. Women, particularly Black, Asian and minority ethnic women, continue to account for around 2/3 of low earners and are more likely to be working on zero-hour contracts or part-time contracts as well. Ahead of the UN International Day to combat Islamophobia this weekend, I'm all too aware of how Muslim women are among the most economically disadvantaged faith group in the UK, impacted by the prevalence of negative stereotypes, harassment and hate crimes. Increased overlap of working and caring responsibilities has added to the ongoing reality that caring continues to be a major factor in women's ability to participate on equal terms. Put simply, women still face structural economic inequality through their lives, and this intersects with other structures of inequality, including race and disability. We also know that violence against women, including trans women, continues to blight our society. I know personally that the impact of domestic abuse on the physical and mental health of survivors can be devastating. 4 years ago, I faced a reselection process in which numerous complaints were made about rule-breaking and misogynistic intimidation, a process marred by the involvement of my ex-husband and his associates. As many members of this House will be aware, I subsequently signed off sick from work. While activists and organisations in the domestic abuse sector expressed alarm at my treatment and my independent domestic violence advocate made representations on my behalf, the matter remains unresolved. The post-separation harassment, the institutional gaslighting and silencing goes on and on. What I am reminded about my lived experience is that domestic abuse can impact people from all walks of life and in all forms of employment, including those of us in public life. To this day, I still have women reaching out from across the country in support, and I'm continuing to work with members from across this House to call on all political parties to ensure that political representatives who are survivors of domestic abuse are not exposed to further harassment in their roles. I also continue to call and campaign for better protections in the workplace more widely, from paid leave for domestic abuse to mandatory policies on domestic abuse in every workplace to eliminate domestic abuse in our society, because domestic abuse requires a whole society approach. And I'm intrigued by today's announcements about a new unit to look into intimidation experienced during elections, given that my ex-husband stood against me at the last general election with the stated aim of trying to set the record straight, after everything that I had already endured. And I will look at ways in which I can contribute constructively in the government's work in this regard. Because this isn't just about me. No survivor of domestic abuse should be prevented from standing for office or staying in public life, having fled abuse because they experience post-separation harassment. And because there is a need to ensure that this place sends the right message in our country. In light of the Mandelson scandal, we need an independent statutory inquiry into all of Jeffrey Epstein's links to British institutions and figures, which I, along with over 70 members of this House, continue to call for. It's also why I believe we need an independent investigation into the activities of Labour Together. Madam Deputy Speaker, as chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Domestic Abuse and Violence, I am delighted to be working with Women's Aid to ensure that no survivor is left behind. As we approach the 5th anniversary of the landmark Domestic Abuse Act 2021 next month, this could not be more important. Because we know in the woke sector that the weaponisation of violence against women and girls by far-right groups and political parties such as Reform harms survivors and ultimately impedes the real work of tackling the root causes of society-wide violence to the detriment of women and girls. It's resulted in women fleeing persecution abroad, facing even more danger here, including the targeting of them at hotels over the past year. The government has an ambitious commitment to halve violence against women and girls in a decade, and our APPG welcomes measures in the VOGUE strategy to try and achieve it, including the overarching cross-departmental approach and focus on prevention. The Minister for Safeguarding has positively engaged with us in this regard and is also delivering on other commitments. However, I am concerned about the government's wider programme of austerity, real terms cuts to benefits, including the retention of the overall benefit cap, the freezing of the Local Housing Alliance, and the continued injustice of the WASPI women's lack of compensation and ongoing assaults on civil liberties, targeting those who are most at risk, minoritised and migrant women, including those from GRT communities. I hope going forward that the government can address these areas in which migrant and minoritised women need our support. Thank you.